how many of you have heard of Butch Cassidy and the Wild Bunch? Okay, well, that's who we're talking about here. In early 1900, in early March, 5 of the outlaws, they started moving up, and they came up through Springerville and were heading towards St. John's. Butch, who was a part owner of a saloon there in Alma, closed up his business. He and another fellow, Bruce Red Reaver, stole some horses, and then they followed, and they were following to catch up. And so these 5 outlaws headed north, and they went through Springerville, and they shopped there, bought ammunition, supplies. They were well armed, probably attracted a lot of attention. And then on March 26th, they headed north towards St. John's. It's about 25 miles from Springerville to St. John's. On the way, they got hungry. They stopped and killed a cow that wasn't theirs. It belonged to a man named Henry Barrett. And the mailman, who was traveling from St. John's to Springerville, noticed these 5 men eating a cow, carving up a cow that wasn't theirs. And so when he got to Springerville, he reported it. And because cattle rustling was a big problem there, and this counted as cattle rustling. And so they reported it to the sheriff, and the sheriff immediately started organizing a posse to catch these rustlers. So the next morning at about daybreak, Beeler's posse, now he has about 5-6 men, they spot the outlaws camped out, and they move in. But before they got there, the outlaws spotted them, started shooting, and there was a big gunfight at the bridge outside of town. And Sheriff Beeler immediately recognized, he's facing these are seasoned outlaws. These aren't just some guys who killed a cow. He sends one of his deputies back to St. John's to get some reinforcements. But meanwhile, the outlaws take off, and Sheriff Beeler chases them, and they ended up on a running gun battle for about, according to newspapers, 10 to 15 miles. Meanwhile, back in town, the deputy roused some people out of bed as daybreak, including Dick Gibbons, and he gets Dick Gibbons' nephew, Gus. And at this point is when Frank LeSueur joins the posse, and there's 8 of them all together, and they're told, that by the deputy, go to the bridge, that's where the gunfight is, because he didn't know they had left. So this posse of 8 goes to follow the sheriff, and then the sheriff's following the outlaws. And Dick Gibbons decides, he thinks he knows where the outlaws are heading, and so he divides his group in half. And he leads 3, 4 of them go one way. He sends Frank and Gus Gibbons and other 2 young men another direction to follow the sheriff, because he thinks if the outlaws are going the way he thinks they are, they can pinch him between the 2. He'll head them off. Frank and Gus and the other 2 young men, they meet a sheep herder who says, I just saw, I saw the outlaws. They were going in this direction, and they were about half an hour behind him. So Frank and his group ride ahead to try and catch them, still thinking the sheriff must be out there ahead of them. And at this point, Dick Gibbons and the others, their horses have given out. They've been riding hard all morning long. Their horses give out. Dick Gibbons comes back to town. He arrives about dusk, and he's surprised to see Sheriff Beeler and his posse are already back. And in fact, they'd been back since about 10 or 11 in the morning, because their horses had given out. And if you remember Sheriff Beeler, he had ridden all day from Springerville to St. John's, about 25 miles. Then he'd ridden all night trying to find the outlaws, found them in the morning, and then he chased them, for 10 to 15 miles, so their horses gave out. So he came back, and so it was just a matter of bad luck that the 2 posses didn't cross each other, because Dick Gibbons thought he was still out there. So Beeler comes back. So meanwhile, Dick is back, his 4, and there's only 4 boys on the trail. Then about 4 o'clock, one of their horses gave out. And so they stopped, and they were about 500 yards from a tall mesa. They're about 500 yards away. They stopped to talk about what to do. Frank said, nope, the sheriff's ahead of us, and so he'll need our help. Let's go on. So they went on, and the two other boys walked their horses back. So Frank and Gus continue up. They get to the mesa. It's a steep mesa draw where they're at. And so they got off and walked their horses up. And so meanwhile, the outlaws were at the top of this mesa, the 5 outlaws. From this mesa, they could see, even without, I've been to the top, even without binoculars, you can see for miles. They saw these 4 young men coming from miles away. They watched them stop, decide what to do. They watched the 2 go away. They watched these 2 come up. So as they were coming up, the outlaws, moved their horses away so that the horses wouldn't smell each other and give themselves away. And then they got behind rocks and boulders and trees up at the top, and they just waited in 5 different positions. So the boys were walking up. Frank was in front, and when they got about 10 to 15 feet away, the outlaws just opened fire. And Frank was killed immediately. Gus, who was behind, was apparently wounded in the stomach. He may have been hit other places, but he was wounded in the stomach, and he had the presence of mind, and he must have been panic-stricken. But he turned and he ran down the hill, and their horses, of course, spooked and just ran away, Frank and Gus's horses. He took off his handkerchief and he put it on his side to staunch the blood as he ran down the hill, and he got about 50 to 75 yards down the hill, but the outlaws, came out from behind and opened fire and felled him. The outlaws then came out and they rifled through the young men's, through their clothes, pulled out their pockets, stole their belts, and took any money, food they had, their guns, and did it to both men. And then they also shot both of them multiple times in the face. And we know that they did it after they were dead. They had powder burns on their faces, and they also, in the case of Gus, he never could have gotten down the hill, had he been shot beforehand. So Frank was shot at least 5 times, and Gus 6 times. Then they didn't come home that night, obviously. The next day, J.T. LeSueur, Frank's father, woke up Dick Gibbons and said, we need to go find out about the boys. And so Dick Gibbons and Sheriff Beeler and Will Gibbons, Gus's brother, and Will Sherwood, who was Frank's childhood friend, they went out and they ran into the 2 young men who had broken away, Francisco Ruiz and the other boy, and they told them, here's where we left, here's where we saw them last. And so that's when they went up and they found the 2 murdered men. Was killed right away, just instantly killed, shot in the neck, broke his thigh and his leg in 2 places, and he had other gunshot wounds. Yeah. He fell there. Gus was behind him. They were walking their horses.
They were coming up through.
Yeah.
How did they even get their horses up here?
It may not have been as washed out.
Right.
We're
That's
talking
true.
over 100 years
ago.
So, but my speculation. Yeah. So they're coming up the draw, and this must have been the way the outlaws came because they were waiting. But in any case, Frank was in front walking his horse because they were walking.
Walking the horse.
Yeah, they couldn't ride, and Gus was behind, and so that may have been why he didn't get hit as badly. He got hit in the stomach, ran back down, and that's about 100 yards away. That's the stone's there, and then the outlaws came out from their hiding places, shot him in the back, and killed him. And then when he was found, he was face down, or face up. I'm sorry, and his head facing down there when his uncle found him. And he said he had 3 ghastly bullet holes in his head. And
maybe short range or something.
Well,
they went up and shot him again.
They shot him after he was dead. I suppose it's possible he was mortally wounded and still, alive or conscious.
Right.
But they went and fired
Yeah.
3 shots. And Dick Gibbons came back several days after this. This was this was March 28th that they found him, and he came back several days later and scouted the place and the hiding places. He found 5 different places where there were shell casings, and he found at least 15 casings, so there were at least 15 shots.
Okay.
And it shows all of the outlaws shot. But then he went to where Gus was found, and he dug out of the ground 3 bullet holes that were shot through his head. More evidence that they just stood up, because the bullets would not have been straight in the ground.
Right.
If he'd been shot at a distance.
Yeah.
And the faces were mutilated, and it just outraged everybody. And they tried the best they could, to wash them and make them look presentable, but
That would have been a direct line right there.
yeah, right up from up there.
I'll bet you.
Yeah.
So they think they were right here, probably, or
Yeah. Well, and
Maybe
top
up
of
here.
this.
and Elliot is I think arguing logically, maybe they were more over here to get a line of shot as
rather than
opposed to
trying-
here.
trying to come over the ridge.
Yeah. But
Get up
anyway,
here and you can't see the monument.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah, from there.
Oh, yeah.
right
so
on the
maybe
edge
they
of this
were-
hill
But if they-
or over
Or
there.
were the casings found?
That I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess
He
he
just-
probably didn't.
He didn't put a GPS pin on it, unfortunately.
My mother found a casing, but I don't know where she was
Really?
when she found it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And she'd come up here to the top and was stirring with a stick, and she found a casing.
Yeah.
On half, so it doesn't hold as many here in the high school. And the oldest movie theater in the state around the El Rio used to be called the Apache. That's where a lot of our ancestors, my parents, went on dates. On the right is where people would park their cabins that came from their wagons that came from out of town. We'll turn left here at Papago. Last child, Bruce, was born, and the last of the children left the home. Up here on the left, you can turn left on that next street. So there's the home. It's been kind of added onto and around, but that was the home where all the visitors would come stay. And this is where Anna Mariah had the stroke, and on the corner right here on the left. Like I said, it's been added to and all, but that's the home.
So again, we're seeing it on the left.
Yeah, on the left now. We're kind of reversing our route so we can see out the left window here. But yeah, like I said, it's been not added onto, but that was the location. And now it's no longer here. On this next corner on the left was the Saffel house and their old hotel where the LeSueurs lived for a couple of years before moving down there. Furniture store, that was the new ACMI built in 1900 that William LeSueur opened. Hill Road, which came through here. We turn left here, and we'll go down now 2 miles to Eager. Oh, but coming up here on the right, straight ahead now, just past this brick building, is where James Hale, a Mormon, was gunned down on Christmas Day. Oh, sometime in the 1880s. The bad guy said he wanted to see if a bullet go through a Mormon. They. On the left here, this rock building, that was the first hospital. I can't remember the year, 29, 39, 1930, 1938, whatever. That LeSueur came down and worked there. Before, she just kind of worked out of her house. There was no hospital and not many...
I was born in that hospital. Brother Huber was born.
Who was born there?
Brother Huber.
Brother Huber was born in that hospital right there. Did Elman LeSueur deliver you? Probably so. Springerville is these red sidewalks that ends here. If you go on top of the hill, that'll be Eager. But this is the big mill to the right. A lot of people kept their milk cows here. My dad used to milk cows for Coulter there. 10 cents a day to milk several milk cows was his first job. So here's the high school now. Round Valley High School. That's right, kind of just on the border between the Eager and Springerville. So both grade schools come here to the high school. There's a seminary building across the street there. We won't take the time to drive over there. On the left here, coming up that next home, that nice home with the red fascia. That was John P. LeSueur's home, who was William F.'s son. In the middle here, you can see a plaque here in front. But this is William F. LeSueur's home he built in 1913. He moved in. 3 bedrooms downstairs, 4 huge bedrooms with huge closets upstairs. They finished it by about the time his kids of his first family were leaving home. But then he had his kids from his second family. They rented the upstairs apartments out to high school teachers who from BYU who were teaching down the high school for the winter. And Gordon and Woodrow both went to BYU and became teachers. I don't know what the influence was, but it had a nice orchard right here. You see a couple trees. There's an apricot tree down the other side of the tree that William F. planted and still producing apricot jelly. Here's our LeSueur Automotive. This is one of our cousins. I got Spencer's truck repaired there one time. Up ahead here, we have the 1 block of town. And you see a Circle K sign straight ahead, and then straight ahead?
Yeah, this is.
That Circle K, that was where Leroy LeSueur lived for a while. On the right, you couldn't see, was where the Eager ACMI was. It got burned down and was replaced by the Modern store, which wasn't too modern. And now it's no longer there. On the corner here that we're turning, straight ahead, this is where Joseph Udall lived. His barn is still standing here. Yeah, we're not going to actually eat here. We're going to pick up our meals, but while we're here, they said we could go inside and use the restrooms here in the chapel. That's what some have been